The stock market crashed, unemployment rose, banks were failing, and the people were losing faith in their nation. America's most economically detrimental era, the Great Depression, was ultimately solved through the economic opportunities presented during World War II rather than the short-term presidential solutions like Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. This grueling decade began in New York with the stock market crash of 1929.
The Great Depression was a truly devastating era with many causes. Unemployment rose and stock prices dropped. While these stocks were dropping on Wall Street, farmers in the Midwest struggled to maintain the high grain prices of World War I. Drought and land exploitation brought the Dust Bowl, which further hurt the farmers. All the while, banks had no safety nets for consumers and few regulations on loans. As banks closed, more people lost their savings and less money was spent on goods and services. The economy had tanked.
The cycle of loss circulating between the consumer and the producer kept a tight grip on the American people. The first president to respond to this disaster was Herbert Hoover.
Hoover's beliefs determined his response to the Great Depression. His laissez-faire policy was built upon individualism, volunteerism, and hard work. Hoover's plan focused on raising protective tariffs, building charities, and the creation of the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. Ultimately, Hoover's response was a failure because the scale of the problem was too complex and the solutions Hoover proposed were too small. The RFC spent too little, too cautiously. Although the Smoot-Hawley tariff retaliated against other nations, Hoover failed to recognize the weaknesses of the international debt structure, the power of other nations' tariffs, and the U.S.'s domestic banking issues, including its use of the gold standard.
Franklin D. Roosevelt's landslide win against Herbert Hoover in the 1932 election demonstrated the American people's weariness from the Depression and readiness for change. FDR was trusted by the people and was able to lead them into his plan for economic revival.
Roosevelt's New Deal immediately countered many of the issues that Hoover was unable to remedy. The American people connected with Roosevelt in a way they hadn't with Hoover. With his fireside chats, the people felt that their thoughts were relevant. With his reforms, they felt that their concerns were addressed. Because of this connection, Roosevelt was able to take drastic measures, like the Emergency Banking Act, which forced banks to close until they had the money and stability to reopen. The Federal Emergency Relief Administration, Public Works Administration, and the Civil Works Administration were all designed to immediately lower the unemployment rates by producing more government jobs. By using government funds, Roosevelt was able to give relief to those who so desperately needed it. While he was able to remedy many of the immediate issues, he could not fix many of the other structural faults of the global and domestic economy. The world was trapped in a cycle of debt from World War I that Roosevelt's Band-Aid.
In the short term, this was precisely what the American people needed, but only through World War II was the Great Depression resolved.
World War II provided the necessary revamp that assured the United States could escape the Great Depression. America's ability to establish itself as a world power put it in position to repair the damage done to the international economy, which Roosevelt was not able to do. The war had generated unexpected revenue that brought the U.S. further out of its crippling debt. Additionally, many women were employed to fill the positions of men who left to fight, expanding the workforce for years to come. The spirit of war also encouraged careful spending and increased the consumption of domestic goods. World War II cemented the progress invoked by FDR's New Deal and provided much-needed long-term stability.
In 1933, the unemployment rate was 25%. By 1943, unemployment rates reached their pre-Depression levels of about 3%. While the Great Depression had come to an end, that didn't stop history from repeating itself, causing America to fall into a recession. At the end of 2009, the unemployment rate was hovering around 10%.
The Great Recession mirrored the Great Depression in that the economy and stock market crashed and left millions of Americans unemployed. If anything, the Great Recession only further proves that Roosevelt's New Deal was a failure in the long run for the continual collapse of the Social Security. Social Security began under FDR as a short-term fix for the economy, but it has since fallen after 2008. As one of the most heralded successes of the New Deal, its failure marks the end of an era.
While many attempts were made to end the Great Depression, it wasn't until the Second World War that America was able to make an unmistakable improvement on the economy. Hoover's administration dropped the ball and FDR's policies were only short-term solutions. Without a war to finance the economy, America would not have left the Great Depression for many more years, if at all.